The flash popped, blinding me for a split second, and I froze mid-smile, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. "She's not pretty enough," Mom muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear, as she always did when the family gathered for photos. At 25, I'd heard those words so often they felt like scars carved into my soul. But today, something in me snapped. I was Lila Carter, the middle child of a family that prided itself on perfection. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect appearances. My older sister, Emily, was the golden child, with her flawless blonde hair and pageant queen smile. My younger brother, Nate, was the charming athlete, his boyish grin lighting up every frame. But me? I was the awkward one, the one with too sharp cheekbones and eyes too big for her face, as Mom would say, her voice dripping with disappointment. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family reunion, the camera would click, and her words would follow, a ritual as predictable as the seasons. This time, though, we were at my cousin's wedding, surrounded by fairy lights and champagne flutes, and I was done being the backdrop to everyone else's shine. The photographer, a wiry man with a kind smile, had just called for the family to gather for a group shot. I adjusted my emerald dress, the one I'd spent weeks choosing, hoping it would finally make Mom see me differently. But as the shutter clicked, her voice cut through the chatter. "Lila, tilt your chin down. You're not pretty enough to pull off that angle." The words hit like a slap, and the room seemed to blur. I stepped out of the frame, my hands trembling, and caught the pitying glances of my cousins. Emily, radiant in her bridesmaid gown, gave me a sympathetic smile, but it only fueled the fire in my chest. I wasn't going to let this be my story anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. I slipped away from the reception, my heels clicking against the marble floor, and found a quiet corner by the venue's garden. The night air was cool, and the stars above felt like they were watching, waiting for me to decide who I was going to be. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken in secret, selfies I'd never shown anyone, where I'd played with lighting and angles, capturing the face Mom said wasn't enough. They weren't perfect, but they were mine, and something about them felt right. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I wasn't going to beg for Mom's approval anymore. I was going to prove her wrong. I'd heard about an open casting call for a modeling agency in the city, a long shot for someone like me, who'd never even considered herself beautiful. But the fire from last night still burned, and I wasn't going to let it fizzle out. I spent the day researching, practicing poses in front of my mirror, and picking out an outfit that made me feel like I could take on the world. A sleek black blazer, white blouse, and jeans that hugged my frame just right. The casting call was in a sleek downtown studio, all glass and steel, with models strutting in and out like they owned the place. I felt like an imposter, my heart racing as I clutched my makeshift portfolio, those secret selfies printed on glossy paper. The other girls were tall, polished, their faces like they'd been sculpted by artists. I was just Lila, the girl whose mom said she wasn't pretty enough. But when my name was called, I walked into that room with my head high, channeling every ounce of defiance I had. The casting director, a woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard, studied me like I was a puzzle. "Turn to the side," she said, her voice neutral. I did, feeling exposed but refusing to shrink. "Now walk toward me." I took a deep breath and moved, imagining I was walking away from every cruel comment, every doubt. She scribbled something, then looked up. "You've got something unique, Lila. We'll be in touch." I left the studio in a daze, my heart a mix of hope and fear. Had I done enough? Was unique just a polite way of saying not good enough? I didn't tell anyone about the audition, not Emily, not Nate, and definitely not Mom. I couldn't bear the thought of her dismissing it, or worse, laughing. For weeks, I checked my email obsessively, jumping at every notification, until one morning, it came. An offer from Eclipse Modeling Agency. They wanted me for a test shoot. My hands shook as I read the words, a contract waiting to be signed. I didn't tell Mom right away. I wanted to be sure, to have something tangible to show her. The test shoot was in a loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight pouring in like it was cheering me on. The photographer, a man named Marcus with a warm laugh, positioned me in front of a white backdrop. "You've got character in your face, Lila," he said. Let's see what it can do. I posed. I smiled. I glared. I laughed. And with every click of the camera, I felt like I was rewriting my story. When the photos came back, I barely recognized myself. My sharp cheekbones looked striking, my big eyes soulful. For the first time, I saw what Marcus saw, what I'd always hoped was there. I printed the best shot, framed it, and brought it home. That night, at dinner, I slid it across the table to Mom. Her fork froze midair, her eyes narrowing as she took in the image. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight. "That's me," I said, my voice steady. "I got a modeling contract. They think I'm pretty enough." The silence that followed was deafening, but for once, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like victory. Mom's silence stretched across the dinner table, her eyes locked on the framed photo of me, poised and radiant, a version of myself she'd never acknowledged. I could see the gears turning in her mind, the disbelief battling with something else, something like fear. "This is nice, Lila," she finally said, her voice clipped, as if admitting more would cost her something precious. "Nice," I echoed, leaning forward. "Mom, this isn't just nice. It's a contract. Eclipse Modeling Agency wants me for their spring campaign." My voice trembled with a mix of pride and defiance, but I held her gaze, refusing to let her dismiss this moment. Emily, sitting across from me, gasped, her fork clattering against her plate. "Lila, that's incredible," she said, her smile genuine but tinged with surprise. Nate, beside her, grinned and gave me a playful nudge. "Look at you, big shot. When's the Vogue cover?" Their support warmed me, but it was Mom's reaction I needed. I wanted her to see me, really see me, for the first time. She set the photo down carefully, like it might burn her, and picked up her fork again. "Well," she said, her tone measured, "modeling is unpredictable. Don't get your hopes too high." The words stung, but they didn't cut as deep as they used to. I was done letting her define my worth. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Eclipse scheduled me for fittings, makeup tests, and more shoots. I spent hours in studios, learning to move my body in ways that felt both foreign and empowering. The creative director, a woman named Vanessa with a knack for spotting potential, pulled me aside after a session. "Lila, your look is raw real. You're not cookie cutter, and that's why you're going to stand out." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me further from the shadow of Mom's doubts. But back home, the air was thick with tension. Mom didn't ask about the shoots, didn't comment on the portfolio I left on the coffee table. Instead, she doubled down on her critiques, pointing out my posture, my hair, the way I carried myself. "You're slouching again, Lila." "Models don't slouch," she'd say, her voice sharp as she flipped through a magazine, oblivious to the irony. I wanted to scream, to shake her and demand why she couldn't be proud, but I held back. I'd show her with results, not words. One evening, I came home to find Emily flipping through my portfolio, her eyes wide. "Lila, these are stunning," she said, holding up a shot of me in a crimson dress, my gaze fierce and unflinching. "How are you doing this? You're glowing." I smiled, but before I could respond, Mom walked in, her expression souring. "Emily, don't inflate her ego. She's got enough to deal with, thinking she's a model now." The words hit like a punch, but Emily didn't let it slide. "Mom, stop," she said, her voice firm. "Lila's doing something amazing. Why can't you support her?" The room went still. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she might snap back. Instead, she turned and left, the silence louder than any argument. I threw myself into work, determined to prove I belonged in this world. The spring campaign shoot was in a botanical garden, with flowers bursting in every color around me. I wore a flowing gown that shimmered in the sunlight, and as the camera clicked, I felt like I was finally claiming my place. Marcus, the photographer, called out encouragement, and Vanessa nodded approvingly from the sidelines. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about Mom's voice in my head. I was just me. When the campaign photos dropped online, they went viral. My face was everywhere, billboards, social media, even a local news segment. Strangers stopped me in the grocery store, asking if I was that model. Emily and Nate were my biggest cheerleaders, texting me screenshots and tagging me in posts. But Mom, she didn't say a word. Not when the neighbors gushed about me, not when my aunt called to congratulate me. Her silence was a wall I couldn't climb. One night, I found her in the living room, staring at an old family photo album. Her fingers traced a picture of me as a teenager, awkward and unsure, her words from back then echoing in my mind. She's not pretty enough. I sat beside her, my heart heavy. Mom, I said softly, why is it so hard for you to be happy for me? She didn't look up. I just wanted you to be realistic, Lila. This world is cruel to girls who don't fit the mold. Her voice cracked, and I realized she wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about herself, about the dreams she'd buried long ago. For the first time, I saw the weight she carried, the fear that had shaped her words. I reached for her hand. I'm not you, Mom, and I'm not giving up. She didn't respond, but her fingers tightened around mine, and in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could change her mind. The flicker of hope I felt that night with Mom didn't last. By morning, she was back to her old self, critiquing my breakfast choice with the same sharpness she reserved for my appearance. Lila, you can't eat that if you're modeling now, she said, eyeing my toast with disdain. I bit back a retort and left for the studio, determined to let my work speak louder than her words. Eclipse was ramping up for Fashion Week, and I'd been booked for a runway show, a dream I hadn't dared to dream. The designer, a visionary named Clara, wanted fresh faces with fire in their eyes, and somehow, I'd made the cut. The rehearsals were grueling, with choreographers barking orders and models jostling for position. I was the rookie, the underdog, but I walked with purpose, channeling every rejection into each step. Backstage, the air buzzed with chaos. Makeup artists wielding brushes like wands, stylists pinning dresses with military precision. I caught my reflection in a mirror, my face transformed by bold eyeliner and a sleek updo. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself, but I liked who I saw. You ready, Lila? Clara asked, her eyes scanning me with approval. I nodded, my stomach a knot of nerves and excitement. The runway was a blur of lights and music, the crowd a sea of faces I couldn't focus on. I stepped out, my heels clicking in time with the beat, and let the energy carry me. Each stride felt like a declaration. I am enough. The applause at the end was deafening, and as I exited the stage, Clara grabbed my arm. You own that, Lila. They're going to remember you. The high of the show carried me through the week, but home was still a battlefield. Mom had seen the live stream. Emily made sure of it, but her only comment was, you looked nervous. Models don't look nervous. I wanted to scream, but instead, I invited her to my next shoot, a magazine spread for a luxury brand. Come see what I do, Mom, I said, my voice steady. Maybe you'll understand. To my surprise, she showed up. She stood in the corner of the studio, clutching her purse like a shield, her face unreadable as Marcus directed me through poses. I wore a silver gown that caught the light, my movements fluid, confident. I could feel her eyes on me, dissecting every angle, but I didn't falter. When the shoot wrapped, Marcus showed her the raw shots on his camera. Your daughter's a natural, he said. Mom nodded stiffly, but I caught a flicker of something, pride maybe, in her eyes. That night, she didn't criticize me at dinner. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I started to wonder if I was chipping away at her walls, if she was starting to see me not as a disappointment, but as a daughter with her own kind of beauty. But the next day, she was back to her old ways, commenting on my unflattering jeans. I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about her, her fears, her regrets, her need to control what she couldn't. I threw myself into my career, booking more shoots, more shows. My face was on bus stops, in department stores, in magazines Mom pretended not to notice. Emily and Nate were my anchors, cheering me on, but I longed for Mom's approval, even as I told myself I didn't need it. One evening, Vanessa called with news that stopped my heart. Eclipse wanted me for an international campaign, shooting in Paris. It was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. I told Mom over breakfast, expecting her usual dismissal. Instead, she froze, her coffee mug halfway to her lips. Paris, she said, her voice soft. That's big. For the first time, there was no critique, no warning about unrealistic dreams. Just a crack in her armor, a glimpse of the mother I'd always wanted. I flew to Paris with a heart full of hope and fear. The city was a dream, all cobblestone streets and glittering lights, but the shoot was intense. Long hours, demanding directors, and a language I barely understood. Yet I thrived, my confidence growing with every frame. The campaign was for a perfume brand, and I was the face of their unapologetic aesthetic, a role that felt like it was made for me. When I returned home, I brought Mom a bottle of the perfume, its sleek bottle glinting in the kitchen light. "This is me," I said, placing it in her hands. "This is what I'm doing." She looked at it, then at me, and for the first time, I saw tears in her eyes. "Lila," she whispered, "I didn't know you could be this." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. Mom's tears that day in the kitchen felt like a turning point, but I wasn't naive enough to think one moment could erase years of hurt. The perfume bottle sat on her dresser, untouched, a silent reminder of our fragile truce. I wanted to believe she was proud, but her old habits crept back, her comments sharper now, as if my success threatened her more than my failures ever did. "You're getting too thin, Lila," she said one morning, eyeing my frame as I grabbed a smoothie before a shoot. "Models need to look healthy, not starved." I bit my lip, resisting the urge to point out that my agency's nutritionist had me on a balanced plan. Instead, I smiled tightly and left, the weight of her words heavier than any camera lens. My career, though, was soaring. The Paris campaign had opened doors I hadn't dared to knock on. I was booked for a couture show in Milan, a cover shoot for a major fashion magazine, and even a guest appearance on a morning talk show. Fans started recognizing me in public, their compliments a stark contrast to Mom's critiques. "You're an inspiration," a teenage girl told me at a coffee shop, her eyes wide with admiration. I thanked her, but inside, I wondered if I'd ever feel like the woman she saw. At home, Emily and Nate were my cheerleaders, but the tension with Mom was palpable. She'd watch my interviews with a blank expression, her only comments about my overdone makeup or forced smile. I started spending more time at the studio, where Vanessa and Marcus became my surrogate family, their encouragement filling the void Mom left. "You're not just a model, Lila," Vanessa said one day, reviewing proofs from a beach shoot. "You're a story. People see themselves in you." That idea stuck with me. I wasn't just proving Mom wrong. I was proving something to myself, to every girl who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. I started sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses on social media, raw moments of doubt and triumph. My followers grew, and so did the messages. "You made me believe I could chase my dreams. Your confidence is contagious." Each one was a brick in the foundation of my new identity. But the higher I climbed, the more Mom seemed to pull away. One night, I found her in the garage, sorting through boxes of old photos. I joined her, curious, and pulled out a picture of her from her 20s, radiant in a sundress, her smile wide and unguarded. "You were beautiful," I said, meaning it. She snorted, her fingers brushing the photo. I was naive. Thought I could be something more than a housewife. Life had other plans. Her words hit me hard. I saw the dreams she'd buried, the ones she'd projected onto Emily, onto Nate, but never onto me. I was the mirror of her failures, the one she couldn't let shine. "Mom," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I'm not you. I'm not giving up my dreams because you gave up yours." She flinched, and for a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. But then she nodded, her eyes distant. "You're stronger than I was," she said, almost too quiet to hear. It wasn't approval, but it was an admission, and it felt like progress. The Milan show was a whirlwind of opulence, crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, and designs that felt like wearable art. I walked the runway with a fire in my chest, knowing Mom was watching the live stream at home. I imagined her seeing me, not as the awkward girl in family photos, but as a woman who'd carved her own path. When the show ended, Clara, the designer, pulled me into a hug. "You're a star, Lila," she whispered. I wanted to believe her. Back home, I braced for Mom's critique, but she surprised me. "You looked powerful," she said, her voice hesitant, like she was testing the words. I froze, unsure how to respond. Thanks. I managed, my heart swelling despite myself. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever gotten. The magazine cover dropped a week later, my face staring back from newsstands, my name in bold letters. Emily framed a copy and hung it in the living room, where Mom couldn't ignore it. At dinner, she didn't mention it, but I caught her glancing at it, her expression unreadable. I realized then that her approval might never come in the way I wanted, but I didn't need it to keep going. I was Lila Carter, and I was enough. The magazine cover changed everything. My face was no longer just mine. It was a symbol, plastered on billboards, shared across social media, even featured in a viral ad campaign. Strangers stopped me on the street, their voices brimming with excitement. You're that model, right? The one from the perfume ad. I'd smile, nod, and thank them. But inside, I was still grappling with the girl Mom had convinced me I was. At home, the air was different now. Mom's critiques were less frequent, replaced by a cautious silence that felt both hopeful and heavy. She'd linger near the framed magazine cover in the living room, her fingers brushing the glass, but she never said more than, "It's a nice picture." Emily and Nate filled the gap, their pride loud and unwavering. "You're killing it, Lila," Nate said, showing me a fan page dedicated to my work. Emily chimed in, "Mom's coming around. Give her time." But time was a luxury I didn't have. My schedule was packed, shoots in New York, a campaign in London, a charity gala where I'd be the face of a youth empowerment initiative. The gala was the one I was most nervous about. I'd be speaking, sharing my story, and the thought of standing in front of hundreds of people, bearing my insecurities, made my stomach churn. But I wanted to do it, not just for me, but for every kid who'd ever felt less than enough. I invited Mom to the gala, half expecting her to decline. To my shock, she agreed, her expression unreadable as she said, "I'll be there." The night of the event, I stood backstage in a sleek black gown, my heart pounding as I rehearsed my speech. The room was filled with influencers, donors, and industry giants, their chatter a low hum. I spotted Mom in the crowd, seated near Emily, her face a mask of neutrality. When my name was called, I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding. I took a deep breath and began. "I grew up hearing I wasn't pretty enough," I said, my voice steady despite the nerves. Every family photo, every mirror, came with a reminder of what I wasn't. But I learned that beauty isn't about fitting someone else's mold. It's about owning who you are. The room was silent, hanging on my words. I told them about the casting call, the contract, the moment I saw myself through a lens that didn't judge. I didn't mention Mom, but I felt her presence, heavy and inescapable. The applause was thunderous, and as I stepped off the stage, I saw Mom wipe her eyes. Emily grabbed my hand, whispering, "You were incredible." Mom didn't speak, but when we got home, she pulled me aside. "Lila," she said, her voice thick, "I didn't realize how much I hurt you." It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was raw, real. I nodded, my throat tight, and hugged her. For the first time, I felt like we might find a way forward. My career kept climbing. I signed with a bigger agency, landed a contract with a global fashion house, and started mentoring young models, sharing the lessons I'd learned. But the real work was at home. Mom and I started talking, really talking. One night, over coffee, she opened up about her own youth, the modeling dream she'd abandoned when she got pregnant with Emily. "I was scared for you," she admitted. "I didn't want you to face the rejection I did." Her confession didn't erase the pain, but it gave me context. I saw her not as the critic who'd diminished me, but as a woman who'd lost her own light and didn't know how to let mine shine. "I'm not scared, Mom," I said, "and I'm not stopping." She smiled, a real smile, and it felt like a bridge between us. The next shoot was for a campaign celebrating unconventional beauty. I stood in front of the camera, my hair wild, my face bare, and felt more powerful than ever. Marcus, the photographer, grinned as he snapped the shots. "You're rewriting the rules, Lila," he said. I believed him. When the campaign launched, it was everywhere, magazines, TV, social media. I brought Mom to the launch party, where my face glowed on a massive screen. She didn't say much, but she held my hand, her grip tight. Later, she pulled out the old family photo album and pointed to a picture of me as a kid, smiling wide. "I was wrong," she said softly. "You were always enough." It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, a step toward healing, toward understanding. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. Mom's admission that I was always enough lingered in my mind, a fragile seed of hope in the rocky soil of our relationship. But healing wasn't a straight line. Some days, she'd slip back into her old ways, commenting on my tired eyes after a long shoot or suggesting I tone down my bold makeup. Each jab stung, but I was learning to let them slide, to focus on the woman I was becoming rather than the girl she'd tried to define. My career was a whirlwind now, a dizzying climb I hadn't anticipated. I was no longer just a face in ads. I was a voice, an advocate. The Youth Empowerment Initiative had grown, and I was invited to speak at schools, sharing my story with kids who felt invisible. "You don't need anyone's permission to shine," I'd tell them, my voice steady with conviction I'd fought hard to earn. Their wide-eyed nods, their shy smiles, reminded me why I kept going. But the spotlight came with shadows. Online, trolls dissected my appearance, echoing Mom's old critiques, too angular, not classically beautiful. I'd scroll through comments late at night, my confidence wavering, until Vanessa's words pulled me back. "You're a story." I wasn't here to be perfect. I was here to be real. I started posting about the doubts, the rejections, the moments I felt like giving up. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages from people who saw themselves in my struggle. At home, Mom was trying, in her own way. She'd clip articles about my campaigns, leaving them on the kitchen counter without comment. Once, I caught her showing a neighbor my latest ad, her voice tinged with something like pride. But she still struggled to say it to my face. I wanted to bridge that gap, to understand her, so I suggested a day out, just the two of us. "Let's go to the museum," I said, remembering her love for art. She hesitated, then agreed. The museum was quiet, its halls filled with paintings that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. We stopped at a portrait of a woman with sharp cheekbones and piercing eyes, her expression defiant. "She reminds me of you," Mom said, surprising me. I smiled, sensing an opening. "Why didn't you ever try modeling again?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle. She sighed, her gaze distant. "I got close once. A scout saw me at a mall, offered me a test shoot. But my parents said it was foolish, that I'd never make it. Then I met your dad, got pregnant, and life happened." Her voice was heavy with regret, and I saw the weight of choices she'd never reconciled. "I didn't want you to get hurt like I did, Lila. I thought I was protecting you." Her words cracked something open in me. I saw her not as the critic who'd wounded me, but as a woman who'd let her own dreams die and feared the same for me. "I'm not you, Mom," I said, echoing my earlier words, but softer this time. "And I'm not afraid of getting hurt. I'm afraid of not trying." She nodded, her eyes glistening, and we stood there, the portrait watching over us like a silent witness. My next project was a documentary, a behind-the-scenes look at the modeling industry and its impact on self-image. I was one of the featured models, sharing my journey from family photo outcast to runway star. The filmmakers wanted raw honesty, so I talked about Mom, about the years of feeling less than, about the contract that changed everything. When the rough cut screened, I invited her to watch. I braced for her reaction, expecting criticism. Instead, she cried. Not the quiet tears of before, but deep, shuddering sobs. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how much I was hurting you." I held her, my own tears falling, and for the first time, I felt like we were meeting as equals, not as mother and daughter locked in a silent war. The documentary aired to critical acclaim, sparking conversations about beauty standards and family dynamics. I was flooded with messages from people who'd faced similar struggles, thanking me for giving them a voice. Mom started joining me at events, not as a critic, but as a supporter, her presence quiet but steady. She didn't always know what to say, but she was there, and that was enough. One evening, as we sorted through old photos together, she paused at a picture of me as a toddler, laughing in her arms. "You were always beautiful," she said, her voice soft but certain. I just didn't know how to tell you. I smiled, my heart full, and realized that proving her wrong wasn't just about my career. It was about showing her that we could both heal. The documentary's success marked a new chapter, not just for me, but for Mom and me together. We weren't fixed, not completely. Years of hurt don't vanish overnight, but we were building something new, brick by fragile brick. She started asking about my shoots, not with criticism, but with curiosity, her questions tentative, like she was learning to speak a new language. My career was at its peak. I was headlining campaigns, speaking at conferences, even collaborating with designers on a capsule collection that celebrated imperfect beauty. Every project felt like a love letter to the girl I'd been, the one who'd stood in front of family photos, shrinking under Mom's words. Now, I was the one shaping the narrative, and it felt like freedom. One morning, I got a call from Vanessa. "Lila, there's a global ambassador role with a major beauty brand. They want you." My heart raced. It was the kind of opportunity that could define a career. The catch? It meant moving to Paris for a year. I'd be leaving behind Emily, Nate, and Mom, just as we were starting to find our footing. I told Mom over dinner, bracing for her reaction. She set her fork down, her face unreadable. "Paris again," she said, her voice soft. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" I nodded, waiting for the critique, the warning. Instead, she smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "I'm proud of you, Lila." The words hit like a tidal wave, washing away years of doubt. I reached for her hand, my eyes stinging. "Thanks, Mom." The weeks before my move were a blur of packing, goodbyes, and final shoots. Mom helped me sort through my things, her hand steady as she folded clothes and tucked away photos. One evening, she pulled out the old family album, the one that had haunted me for years. "Let's take a new picture," she said, holding up her phone. I laughed, surprised, and we posed together, our smiles wide, no filters needed. When she showed me the photo, I saw us, really saw us, for the first time. Two women, flawed and fierce, finding their way. Paris was everything I dreamed and more. The ambassador role was demanding, but I thrived, my confidence a quiet strength. I sent Mom postcards, called her weekly, and invited her to visit. When she arrived, 3 months into my stay, she stepped off the plane looking nervous but determined. We spent days exploring the city, laughing over croissants, marveling at the Eiffel Tower's glow. At a shoot, she watched from the sidelines, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen before: pride, untainted by fear. The campaign launched with a gala, my face on every screen, my story in every speech. Mom stood beside me, her hand in mine, and when I took the stage to thank the team, I looked at her. "This is for my mom," I said, my voice steady, "for teaching me that beauty isn't about perfection, it's about courage." The crowd cheered, but it was her tearful smile that mattered most. Back home, I kept in touch, sending her photos from shoots, inviting her to events. She started painting again, rediscovering the dreams she'd buried. One day, she sent me a canvas, a portrait of me, not as a model, but as her daughter, laughing, my eyes bright with possibility. "You were always enough," she wrote on the back. I hung it in my apartment, a reminder of how far we'd come. Years later, at a family reunion, we gathered for a photo. The flash popped, and I braced for Mom's old refrain. Instead, she squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "You're stunning, Lila." I smiled, my heart full, and realized I'd done more than prove her wrong. I'd helped her see herself, too. My journey wasn't just about a modeling contract. It was about rewriting the story of who I could be and who we could be together. It was about finding beauty in the broken places and courage in the quiet moments. And as the camera clicked, capturing us side by side, I knew we were enough.